this isn't medically necessary. And if you do this, I don't mind saying it. You're either misinformed or you're a horrible person for doing it. I pull no punches about it.
Hello, Intactivists. I have an interview for you today.
Terry Difazio, 73-year-old male, intact from the state of Vermont. I was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1953. My family moved to southern Vermont in 1956.
Why are you involved in this movement?
Well, just about the time my son was born, 1980, the subject of circumcision came up from quite a few of people that we knew, especially the people that worked with my ex-wife, and it was starting to become a hot topic. And I decided that I was going to do whatever I could to tell people that we did not want, we did not do this to our son, and there was absolutely no medical reason to do it. And it was really funny because the people that try to rationalize and justify doing this have always got one person they knew that had a problem when they were later in life. And it's really kind of funny.
What's the problem you're referring to, and what do you mean by funny?
Oh, they would say things like, well, I knew this one guy, and he got an infection later on, and they had to circumcise him later. And it was like you're gonna mutilate everybody just because of one guy.
Yeah, that's an excuse. It's not good logic.
And the other one of course is well, I want him to look like all the other boys in the locker room. And another one is, well, I want him to look like dad. And and it's the most incredibly insane excuses. And as soon as you slap down one argument, another one comes up. And the latest round is the funniest of all, that it helps prevent AIDS. And it we're smarter than that.
Yeah, that's the big problem in Africa, telling people that, and too many of them are believing it.
Absolutely.
What have you done for Intactivism?
Well, I've talked with a lot of people, different people about it, and whenever I hear somebody, trying to promote it, I try to tell them that there are no good medical reasons for it. And of course, then they'll stammer and stutter, and they'll come up with some other reason. Um, I can't say I've actually been part of any big organization, although way back in the late 1980s, I was in touch with Marilyn Milos and No Circ for a while. And I remember back in 1987, I sort of put some pressure on Blue Cross to stop paying for these things. And in 1987, they stopped paying for them here in Vermont.
How did you tell Blue Cross to stop paying for circumcisions?
Well, they were Blue Cross, of course, was paying for everything and anything. I mean, they were paying for operations that were totally unnecessary. For example, um, if a man or a woman wanted to get sterilized after they had their two or three children, they would do it, and of course they'd pay for it. And then the next thing you know, the woman's there. Oh no, I want more kids, so they were paying for the reversal. And then finally, Blue Cross said we can't do this anymore, so they stopped doing that. And on top of that, I guess when I was speaking to some guy, I think his name was Ken. He was the head of Blue Cross and from Rutland, Vermont. And he said, this just came across my desk, and we're not going to pay for reversals of vasectomies or tubal ligations, and we're not paying for circumcisions anymore. The strange thing about that was it really didn't drive the rate down. People were just paying for it out of pocket.
That's unfortunate.
Yes. And I remember one woman, I went to school again and got my college degree, and I did it the right way in the 90s. And I remember this one woman saying, "Oh, I had to pay $150 to have my son circumcised because the insurance wouldn't pay for it." And she was all in a huff about it. I said, "Isn't that great? You paid to have your son mutilated." Oh, that caused quite a stir.
She got angry with you?
Yeah, yeah, she got pretty angry with me. The teacher had to sort of shut the class down and steer us in another direction. We were talking. I think the discussion at the time was about insurances and welfare and things like that. But anyways, it's been amazing to me how a state like Vermont that's supposed to be so progressive and so liberal is still 8% over the national average. Here in Vermont stands at about 63.5%. However, lately I've been trying to find the statistics from Vermont. I've even called and written to the Vermont Department of Health, and they say that they don't even track them anymore.
Is the reason that the Blue Cross in Vermont stopped paying for circumcisions was because it was just costing them too much?
Yes, and they realized it wasn't necessary. The people at Blue Cross finally said, this isn't medically indicated, so we're not going to pay for it anymore.
I mean, the people of Vermont, they're paying out of pocket. Too bad they didn't realize it wasn't medically necessary.
Well, even if they did, it's become such a social construct now that I don't even understand when. I mean, I could tell you stories about people that they say, yes, we know it's horrible, we know it's this, but we had it done anyway. I, it might be possible. Some people can't add two and two. That's a possibility.
Just to conform.
I believe so. They don't want to be thought of as, different or an outsider or something like that.
When you were talking with Marilyn Milos, we'll start there. How did you get in contact with her?
I don't actually remember how I did. All I know is back then there was no internet. That was in the 80s, and I must have picked up a magazine or newspaper article and saw her name. Like I said, I don't actually remember how I did that, but all I know is she was great to talk to. I talked to her on the phone several times, and we talked strategies, and I remember it was way back on the first symposium they ever did. I think it was in San Francisco. And there was another guy up here. He was over in St. Albans, Garrison Davis. He worked at UVM and he was from St. Albans. And he was telling me how this one doctor in St. Albans promoted this so much that their circ rate's like 90% at St. Albans Hospital. By the way, the guy's dead, but it doesn't matter. Everybody's still doing it. His name was, believe it or not, his name was Aaron T. Fink.
You said that Vermont is progressive, so you found it surprising that circumcision was high there. Does that mean that you think that circumcision rates are lower in blue states than red states?
I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I've found that, for example, in your blue states, Oregon is the lowest in the nation. California is very low. Washington State is very low. And even Texas is only 50-50. Part of the reason I think for some of that drop in the rate is the fact that there has been huge influxes in the Hispanic and Asian communities, and they don't do that culturally.
Yes, yes. Immigration has pushed the rates down, and I'm not saying that they've encouraged natural-born Americans or people who are Americans for a couple generations here to stop doing it. It's just that what they've done is they've increased the population by adding more people to the country. And since they're not cutting their kids, it creates a higher percentage of the population who doesn't cut their kids. That's all. It kind of creates a false progress kind of illusion. And we still have to get the people who would be doing it and have, because they've been doing it in their family for the past few generations, to stop.
Yeah, but the more people see that those of us that are uncut have not had a problem, I think it sort of takes them aback as to maybe I made a mistake. I have talked with many parents who are what we call regret parents, and there was a time when you never saw that. I'll give you an example. I believe it was right after my son was born. There were several women that asked my wife and myself, did you have your son circumcised? And we said no. And these women thought about it, and they ended up having their kid circumcised anyway. And then later on, they said, if I had known how horrible this was, I wouldn't have done it. I said, well, we tried to tell you.
Hey guys, it's me, Pots. I'm briefly interrupting this interview to let you know about the Pots e-commerce program. It is vital to keeping the Prevail Over the System channel alive. Go and join us on our Discord to learn more. And best of all, it's free to partake in the Pots e-commerce program, and we don't need any of your information whatsoever. This helps us keep the interviews coming along with other Intactivist content to empower, teach, and update Intactivists with very important information, as well as being the voice for the Intactivist public. Thank you all so much. Okay, now back to the interview.
Regret parents have a powerful voice because when people see the regret in them, some people will think, oh, I don't want to experience that. And that's the reason regret parents tell people, so
Right.
that they don't have to go through the same thing.
The thing was with with two of these ladies that I know, they were regret parents, and then they had another child, and it was a girl, so it was a moot point anyway.
Right. Yeah. Didn't have to deal with it then. Also, though, there is the intersex babies that we don't talk about too much of intactivism because intersex is a rare thing. But because they have a condition that causes their genitals to be abnormal and doctors think, oh, I got to fix that to make it look normal, they get cut. And as intactivism, we don't approve of that either.
I remember something that Marilyn told me a long time ago, and I've told people this, and they're absolutely shocked when they hear this. I said, there are rare instances when a baby is born, a baby boy is born without a foreskin. It's rare, but it happens. And if that happens, the doctor has to put down on the birth certificate that there's a birth defect. So if the baby's born perfect, you're giving this doctor permission to induce a birth defect. And usually I'll get one of two responses. Either there's dead silence, or they'll go, well, it has to be done for cleanliness reasons, and you have to clean it, and you do this. And it's the same old, it's the same old, I don't know what you call circular argument.
Yeah. The same old excuse.
Yeah. Oh, it's all been an excuse. And, the United States, people think that the whole world does this, and the whole world doesn't. For medical reasons, we're the only country that does this. Other countries do it for religious reasons, or they do it for cultural reasons, but nobody else does this for medical reasons. And that's why they've been able to promote it here in America. They put this health stigma upon it. I just fired my physical therapist. She was an excellent physical therapist. He said, when I had my first boy, and I said, oh, he said, yeah, there were only so many slots available in the hospital for baby boy, and I was lucky to get one. And then she's kind of giggles a little bit. She says, yes, I remember taking him for his circumcision, and the doctor, there was so many boys ahead of him, and the doctor looked sleepy, and she made a whole joke out of this whole thing. And I said, we're talking about her OBGYN. I said, well, when my ex-wife and I were asked by our OBGYN if we were going to have it done, we said no. And he said, good, I don't have to go into my anti-circumcision speech. Because he was definitely against it. The guy's long dead now. But so anyways, well, she said, well, I had to have it done because my father told me that his brother had to have it done when he was in his 20s. And I said, that's really interesting. I said, I'm 73. My son is 44. We've never had an infection. And all of a sudden she goes, well, I guess there's pros and cons to each one. And then there was dead silence for about 5 minutes. After that, I called the physical therapy office at the hospital 3 days later when I calmed down because I was seething mad. And I just said, I'm canceling all my appointments. She goes, do you want me to leave your chart open if you want to come back? I said, no, close me out. I'm not coming back. And they didn't ask why. But they can, if anybody does ask, I'll tell them. But she made a whole big joke about it. Yeah, it was, tee hee, giggle. It's funny when that happens, If it happens to a guy, it's funny. If it happens to a girl, it's awful. And this is what I've been noticing for years now.
Yeah, it's a big double standard in our society.
Absolutely. You look at television programs and commercials. Since the mid 1970s, men are thought of as being stupid, and they're only interested in sex. That's all they want. And it just keeps perpetuating every year. It's the same thing. And I think American men are getting fed up with it.
Oh yeah, I think the reason that idea was put out was to tear down society because men have been the front runners in innovation. Inventing things, building construction work, technology, and maintaining it. And if men are no longer valued for that, people don't think about it and they don't appreciate them for it, then guys will stop doing it because the reward of People knowing they're valuable won't be there. And then society's going to start to downfall. You get people to devalue a very key component of a system, then the system starts to collapse. And then
Yeah.
people are easier to control. I really think that's the bigger picture. And that's a horrible outcome. And that's why it's very important to push against this men are incompetent and men don't care attitude.
I fully agree. And I run into, I don't run into it that much now, but for a while there, I was running into women who always had an axe to grind. They've always got an axe to grind. And finally, I just looked at one of them and I said, you know, you say you don't need men. You don't, men have it so good. I said, well, why don't you explain this to me? Explain to me when your car breaks down, who do you take it to? And please explain to me why we can't work together and why we always have to be at loggerheads. Can you explain that too? Because when you talk about circumcision, everybody goes tee hee, giggle giggle. It's so funny. But if you say, when I've said to women, how would you like that done to you when you were a baby? Oh no, that's horrible. You can't do that. What is the difference?
Exactly. That's a way to get them to understand.
Because then they try to say, well, it's not like female genital mutilation. Well, yes, it is in a way. They do these circumcisions to little boys when they're like 8, 9, 10 years old in the Philippines.
That's true. Yeah, and they do that as a big public spectacle. The whole neighborhood's there watching.
Yep, I
It's
know.
so
I don't
weird.
have. I know that. And the whole stigma behind it is if we don't have our boy cut, he won't find a girlfriend. He won't find a wife. If that's the criteria you need, I don't want one. you know.
When someone brings up the argument, oh, men are worthless and men only care about sex, men aren't needed for society, and like you said, well, if your car breaks down, who do you call, right? And what's that mechanic probably going to be? I
Hmm.
would ask the question: do you really think that the human race got this far without men being able to help us advance?
Hmm. Oh yeah.
No, of
Uh,
course not. No, it's men who were the major contributors to the majority of things that we have these days.
well, I've always said, I know women who are mechanics. You don't find many, but you'll see them. They're out there, and it's a matter of you need to work together because if you have an island with 100 men and one woman, in 1 year you'll have one more person. If you have one man and 100 women, in 1 year you could have 100 more people. So don't tell me that men are unnecessary.
Yeah, it's a very foolish belief, and it makes me wonder what got anybody to believe in it. And it is intended to ruin society, to convince anybody to believe that half of the population, who's been the most important half for survival and innovation and advancement, is now worthless, is a very detrimental belief. About arguing against circumcision, what do you think the best way to argue against it is? And that's not only with the things you say, but how you conduct yourself and how you respond to when people start giggling because they're put on the spot and their logic is exposed to be nonsense. So it's a lack of logic. How do you think the best way to deal with that is?
I'm not sure because they use so many different fronts to come back with. For example, if I go, well, when I said to her point blank, my son is 44, I'm 73. We've never had an infection. She was stunned. She couldn't. She was like she wasn't prepared for that. But she came right out with, well, there's pros and cons to both sides. And when there isn't any pros and cons to both sides. You know, it's rather silly. And I did stop short of one thing, and I wish I'd have said it to her right to her face because she is a good Christian, and I should have said to her, "Oh, you're Christian, right? Does your God make mistakes?" That's what I should have said to her. Does your God make mistakes? Because if you believe every man's got to be circumcised, then your God makes mistakes, doesn't he? I was so angry, I could have ripped her head off, but I'm too civilized, I'm afraid.
There's also Bible passages that disapprove of circumcision. Those are
Yeah,
good.
all you have to do is go to the New Testament.
Yes.
The Old Testament was the Jewish faith, and gosh, that was the most incredibly bloody, masochistic, and disgusting era. Um, I don't go to church anymore. I've had it with all these Christians who try to quote the Bible, and they use whatever they want to rationalize and justify all of the brutality that they have. And one of them, I remember one time see, I work for a TV station, and we were helping a church do their church videos. We've worked with other churches, and this one guy was a preacher from Indiana, and he was like a guest. And he says, and I happened to walk in right in the middle of his sermon, and he said, "When my son was born," he said, "my wife didn't want him circumcised." And I said, "We have to do that because it's in the Bible." And that's just another one of these excuses. And I don't care what anybody believes in, or if they're Christian, Jewish, whatever they are. But when you start quoting the Bible, you've lost me immediately, because people will just cherry pick.
Yes, they do. How do you think that intactivism can improve?
I know that some lawyers have filed lawsuits, and I think that might be the only recourse. For example, when my stepson was born in 1966 at a Navy hospital in North Carolina, my wife Barbara and her late ex-husband, they weren't even asked. They just did it. And what I found out through like 1970, 71, I've heard other parents say the same thing. And what happened was people were starting to file lawsuits. And so they said, okay, we'll start asking. We'll ask them if they want it done. And then people were going, especially women. I know one woman, her name was Val. And she said, when my first son was born, they asked me, and she said, I didn't even know what it was. So, of course, I said yes, because the doctor recommended it. So then more lawsuits came out, and now they have what I know in Vermont, they have this thing called informed consent. Before you will say yes to this, you have to watch a video of it. So you know exactly what it is.
So a law got passed to make that mandatory. That's good.
I'm not sure if it was a law, but I think doctors got sick of being sued just because they were too cut happy.
It's about the money for them. Well, they're getting
Of
paid.
course it is.
I think the legal action will be the most effective way to put a stop to genital mutilation.
I agree. And now you're gonna see another thing, and it's not that prevalent yet, but I see it coming, and that is you've got a big influx of people from the Middle East, and they're bringing their doctors over, and they're doing these to girls. They're horrified when they hear about it happening to girls, but nothing about when it happens to boys. Nothing.
And it's sad that if it ever goes to trial, some judges let it slide because it's cultural preference.
Probably he's been circumcised too, so he doesn't care. This was something I read. That guy was telling me about Garrison Davis. He used to go by the name of Gary Davis. He said the reason circumcisions are done, or why doctors push it, is because either they've been circumcised, they have friends who do it, or they do it themselves. And so what they're doing is they're saying, oh, well, everybody gets it done. And I'm amazed at how many people just don't realize that this is not as popular as it used to be.
I think when it becomes well known that it's going out of style, then other people will stop doing it. It'll go out of style faster.
Yeah, I was hoping that I won't mention any names or anything, but one of my granddaughters was studying to be a nurse at UVM Medical, and she saw one of these, and she was horrified at what she saw. But when she had a baby boy, it got done, because the father wanted his little boy to look just like him.
That's tragic.
Yes, it is. And I've never felt the same way about her again. I can't even, she's 30, she's 31. She's a good mom. I know that. And she's got two beautiful kids, but I just can't. I mean, I always gave her everything growing up. She needed rides to school, from school, to dance, from dance. Now it's like, you know, I don't really have much time. And it's just a perpetuation of the brutality. I mean, I know what happened to her husband, but that's no excuse to keep doing it, especially when you've seen it done and how horrible it is. The other argument I like is some guy said to me one time, well, I'm circumcised and I turned out just fine. I said, yeah, I'm not circumcised. I turned out even better.
What do you think is the best way people can offer their services and contribute to the intactivism movement?
I think you just have to keep telling people that you don't agree, you don't approve of it, and you don't agree with them. It doesn't have to be done. There isn't a medical benefit, and if you do it, you're wrong. You're doing it for all the wrong reasons. Even if you want to use the excuse, well, it's a part of my religion. Come on. Do you mean to tell me if your religion said you must cut off your baby's pinky finger because your religion tells you to, you do it?
You know,
The
some
other,
people would.
yeah, probably some would. Another one was, I remember I did confront one guy about this a couple of years ago. He said, well, I had it done because I want my son to look like me. And I said, well, my son has a big scar on his side from an appendix operation. Do you mean to tell me if he had a son, he would want the same thing for his kid? He would want a big slice put in him just so he'd look like his son will look just like him? Is that what you're telling me, sir? Usually they just get angry and they walk off.
It's a really weak argument.
Of course it is. Yeah, it, and I know, I mean, I've researched it enough to, I remember when it first started, that guy, what's his name? Kellogg started it because
John Harvey Kellogg in Battle Creek,
yeah,
Michigan.
yeah, he was the guy that wanted to stop masturbation. Believe it or not, I had a biological mom and an adopted mom, and my adopted mom did not have me done, but she was still under the impression that if she'd had it done, I wouldn't have masturbated, which is insane. I mean, I don't know how these things got started.
So you're saying that the way for people to continue intactivism is just to talk to people about this.
Whenever
Inform
the
them.
subject comes up, this is what got me so angry with my physical therapist. I did not bring the subject up. She did. Because when I told my wife about this, she goes, well, why did you bring up the subject? I said, I didn't. She did. She's the one that brought up the subject.
And she didn't really want to hear the truth.
No, she didn't.
So why
She
do you
thought
think
I
she
was just,
mentioned it?
I don't know why she mentioned it. I really don't know. It had to do with admission into the hospital. I don't even know where this came from. And this is not some kid either. This woman is about 42 or 43 years old. And she's got three kids, two girls and a boy. So it's not like this is some kid that doesn't know better. This is a fully grown, matured woman. So I don't know where or why it came up. I really don't. Now, my son and I talk about this all the time. And he's told me twice, thank you for not letting him do this to me. Thank you for leaving me intact. I told my medical doctor, who's a woman, she's my doctor. And I brought up the argument of sensitivity and how you lose 30% sensitivity. And her answer was, I've heard that. So I think people are getting more informed than they used to. And yeah, more and more people are saying, yes, I heard that it's less sensitive.
Well, that's all the questions I have. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Nothing other than the fact that I appreciate the time, and I hope this message gets out to other people that this isn't medically necessary. And if you do this, I don't mind saying it. You're either misinformed or you're a horrible person for doing it. I pull no punches about it. You do this to your kid knowing full well, then you're just a horrible person. Now, if you're one of these regret moms, that I understand. Sometimes the medical profession likes to give you a good snow job,
I would say to be a regret parent, you have to know the consequences of circumcision.
Right.
To regret anything, you have to know the consequences of what you've done.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay, that was Scott and Terry Difazio. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you have any questions for Terry, I'll put his links down in the description below so you can go ahead and keep up with him and follow him. Also, thank you, Scott, for conducting this interview. Let me know how you feel Scott did. Fun fact, he even provided the thumbnail for this video. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please share and like this to get this out to more people. Bye!